Sometimes you make a system, and sometimes you make a system so yourself and others can make multiple games off of that same system in an ever-growing Mobius strip of unique and wonderful settings that people can easily swap between as they already know the basics from the last time they played. Today, we're covering a previously mentioned system in detail and checking out if this may lead to a game for you and your group. On this episode of System Check, we're looking at LUMEN RPG. So, as we are checking out a system that's made to be used as a basis for other games, this video is going to be very mechanics heavy, but I will later be talking about two of the games made by the creator of Lumen, Spencer Campbell, also known as LUMEN RPG, using said system. I want to start with exploring the origins and design philosophy that LUMEN RPG has laid out when making this. To quote the itch.io page, Lumen is an RPG system for action-packed power fantasy games, inspired by some of my favourite video games and genres. I wanted to capture those exciting moments on the screen and bring them to the table. It started with my love of Destiny, but I love all sorts of powerful character genres. Looter shooters, Borderlands, hero shooters, Overwatch, dungeon crawlers, Diablo. I love to see the numbers go up. With Lumen, you can create your own game, illuminated by Lumen. Highlights of the system include quick dice rolling, no skill lists, it's about how you approach a task, not what you're doing. Combat is fast and characters feel powerful. Gameplay loop that keeps the players wanting to get back out there. To summarise all that, it's a game design philosophy with a focus on fast-paced, getting straight to it gameplay, with a simplistic loop designed to make you feel powerful. But how well does it capture that feeling of being the main character and dominating the battlefield? Let's start with what makes up the game's dice rolls. The only dice the system uses by default is d6s. All Lumen games will have 3 key rolls, corresponding with one of the 3 stats that their character will have. Each stat is a dice pool equal to the value of that stat. So if stat A has a value of 3, you would roll 3d6, with the highest number rolled being your final result. What your result means is split into 3 ranges of success. A 1 to 2 on the die means the action fails and there is a consequence. A 3 to 4 on the die means the action succeeds, but there is a complication. And a 5 to 6 on the die means the action succeeds with no problems. What a consequence will be will depend on the situation you are rolling for. In combat, you would likely receive an attack in return. An example for an out-of-combat consequence provided is that when getting a 4 whilst attempting to sneak, you aren't spotted, but the guards are alerted to some kind of sound. So what else makes a character in Lumen? What sets characters apart from one another is the class system, the concept of each character having different powers they can use in and out of combat, with some form of resource, mana, SP, etc., that offers some level of tactics to the game. Technically, you don't have to have classes in a Lumen-based system, but this is their way of neatly organising the powers and making each class's role more clear. Powers are described as a way to make your character show off. They are set actions that have guaranteed results with no roll. This could be dealing damage, teleporting around, or other shenanigans. You can also have passive powers alongside the more active use ones. Health in the system will vary depending on how difficult the game wants to be. Enemies in combat automatically hit, meaning typically their damage or harm won't be high per hit, but with guaranteed damage, players need to keep an eye on all of their resources to keep themselves healthy and going. The concept of death is left very much up to the individual game. Some may simply have them be removed for the rest of combat, with no other consequences. Some may inflict some permanent change upon the character. Combat in Lumen games are split into player turns and GM turns. To make this easier to explain, I'm going to make use of this combat flowchart from the Lumen powered game, This World Summons Too Many Heroes, which you can find a review of here, plug plug plug. As we can see, we start with a player's turn, in which players take actions in whatever order they like, and can also move. Movement in this game is very abstract, with it being defined into the following 3 ranges. Close, in melee or a few steps away. Near, across the room or a quick sprint can get there. And far, anything beyond that. This means you don't actually need a map and can do combat in the theatre of the mind if you desire. Movement would be moving between these theoretical ranges, so if you were to move one band closer to someone near, you would now be in the close range band. Now, taking an action is a bit of a vague term, as there aren't many defined actions. You can make an attack using whichever attribute you like, attempting to use your weapon to deal damage, or you can make up an action and justify your use of an attribute to make it. For example, one might use a stat related to being strong to attempt to break something. Once everyone's had their turn, it moves on to the GM's turn. By default, the GM has the enemy team perform 3 moves. This could be them attacking, applying buffs, debuffs, etc. Enemies don't need to roll for their moves, rather having them succeed automatically, meaning their attacks will always hit. This is going to be a big point of contention for some GMs, but we'll be getting to that later. Once the enemies have made their moves, for every enemy that has been slain that round, the GM rolls for a number of drops from the enemies. The example drops are health and resource recoveries that can be used by the players immediately. This helps balance against the guaranteed hits from foes as you can play aggressively and be rewarded with the health back. After the drop, the battle itself can then change in a variety of ways. Maybe it's reinforcements, maybe it's changes to the terrain or the battlefield, or even the appearance of a boss monster. And then a new round begins again with the player's turn once more. Now, let's talk about the fun things that help with both character progression and smacking foes. Weapons. All weapons have three key factors. Name of the weapon type, these are usually groups rather than specific weapons, for example melee, range, but can be more specific. Harm, the default damage the weapon deals on a hit. And range, the range band that the weapon can function in. We also have the tag system. These are additional weapon traits that can be used to further expand and upgrade weapons. These are going to vary between games, but the idea is that you get more of them as you progress and can also be used to make legendary or mythical weapons in a game. There aren't set rules for how characters progress and grow in strength, but they do give ideas, like rewarding boosts to your health and resource pools alongside boosting stat, or giving additional powers to give your players more options and abilities to deal with increasing challenges. Lastly, we'll talk about Lumen's design around session structure. A session is split into three parts: briefing, the mission, and the advancement. The briefing is where the players learn of what their mission is and gather information and prepare to tackle the mission. The mission is the bulk of the gameplay, but you'll be actively completing your objectives, be it slaying a beast, delving into dungeons, or saving a cat from a tree. And advancement, where you've fulfilled your mission and claim your rewards, gaining upgrades and loot. This can be done via upgrading your stats and attributes, or by an increase in the power of the weaponry and loot. And that's the basics of Lumen. But let's discuss a bit about the pros and cons of this system. I do really like that this is definitely fast paced, and its structure is fantastic for one-shots and Monster of the Week styled campaigns. But as a GM, I do find it sad I won't often be rolling using this as is. I like rolling for my enemies and adding that extra level of randomness to my games. I do think it's a very video gamey system, which makes sense considering the stated origins. It absolutely does great at making an easy to play, quick to learn power fantasy of fast paced action. I mentioned earlier that Deval RPG had gone on to make two different games making use of this system: Light, a Destiny inspired action TTRPG, and Nova, a mech TTRPG game. With just a cursory glance at both systems, they are both making use of this framework and building upon it in different ways, and I think this proves the strength of Lumen as a foundation. It's just the right level of structure that you can easily build and expand on mechanics, but still have a solid foundation so you don't need to start from scratch. I've mentioned in past system checks that I've run and played systems using Lumen, and did have a great time, and I'm genuinely excited to see what else comes from it in the future. I think that even if you don't end up using Lumen for designing a system, it's worth a read through for ideas, especially because he was kind enough to give all this for free on his itch.io, which is linked down below. And I might even have a go designing a little something myself. So what do you think of Lumen? Do you like the simplicity, or do you feel it needs more depth to be up your alley? Let me know down below. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like, and if you want to watch more, feel free to subscribe for future videos. I've been Deval, and I'll see you next time. Happy adventuring!